The fluorescent lights of Rich Tech Industries' main conference room buzzed overhead as I watched my father sign away my life's work. My hands were trembling under the table, but I kept my face carefully neutral as David Thompson, my father's golden boy, smirked at me from across the polished mahogany surface. And with that, my father said, setting down his Mont Blanc pen with a decisive click, the neural interface patent is officially transferred to David. Congratulations, son. Son, he'd never called me daughter with that much warmth, even though I'd spent the last 3 years developing the technology that could revolutionize human-computer interaction. The neural interface was my baby, born from countless sleepless nights and endless lines of code. My name is Alexandra Richards, and at 28, I was watching my father give away my breakthrough invention to a man whose greatest technological achievement was optimizing our company's email server. Mr. Richards, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. I need to object to this transfer. The neural interface was developed using company resources. My father cut me off, his steel gray eyes dismissing me. The company has the right to reassign patents as it sees fit. I dug my nails into my palms. I developed it in my private lab, using my own equipment. The only company resource I used was the testing facility, which I paid to rent. David leaned forward, his expensive suit creasing slightly. Alex, don't be difficult. You know this is for the best. The interface needs someone with experience to guide it through development and marketing. Someone like you. I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice. Tell me, David, can you even explain how the neural mapping algorithm works? His face reddened slightly, but my father intervened before he could respond. That's enough, Alexandra. The decision is made. David has given 20 years to this company. He deserves this opportunity. And what have I given? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. 3 years of research, a breakthrough technology that could help millions of people with disabilities communicate, my entire life savings invested in development. You're young, my father said dismissively. You'll have other opportunities. Besides, let's be realistic. You'll get married eventually, have children. The company needs someone who can focus entirely on this project. The casual sexism struck me like a physical blow. I looked around the conference room at the other board members, all men, all nodding along with my father's words. Not one of them seemed to see anything wrong with what was happening. I see, I said quietly. Well then, I guess there's nothing left to discuss. I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the hallways of the company my grandfather had built, the company I'd grown up dreaming of leading one day. Now those dreams felt like ashes in my mouth. My private lab was on the 3rd floor, away from the main research and development department. I'd chosen it specifically for its isolation, wanting to work without constant oversight. Now I was grateful for that privacy as I closed and locked the door behind me. The neural interface prototype sat on my workbench, a sleek headset that looked deceptively simple. Only I knew the complexity of the code running through it, the countless iterations and improvements I'd made over the years. And only I knew about the crucial modifications I'd made last week, modifications that weren't documented in any of the patent paperwork. I sat down at my computer, typing in the encryption key that would unlock my private servers. The neural interface's core programming began scrolling across my screens. The real programming, not the simplified version I'd included in the patent application. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend and fellow researcher, Emily Chen. Just heard what happened. Please tell me you have a plan. I smiled slightly, thinking of all the times Emily had warned me about my father's old-school attitudes. Meet me at the binary at 8. I texted back. Bring your laptop. The binary was our favorite coding hub and coffee shop, where we'd spent countless hours debugging and brainstorming. It was also conveniently free of any corporate surveillance. I began systematically downloading my research onto encrypted drives, making sure to erase any trace of the downloads from the system logs. The patent might belong to David now, but he had no idea that the technology was essentially useless without the latest updates that existed only in my private files. As I worked, my mind wandered back to the conversation I'd had with my mother just last week. She called me late one night, worried about rumors she'd heard from her friends on the board. Your father is planning something, Alexandra, she'd said, her voice tight with concern. He's been meeting with David and the lawyers. You need to protect yourself. I should have acted sooner, but some part of me hadn't wanted to believe my father would actually do this. Despite everything, I held on to a childish hope that he would eventually see my worth, see that I was more than just his daughter who played with computers. A knock at my lab door startled me from my thoughts. Alex, it's Mom. I quickly minimized my screens before opening the door. My mother stood there, elegant as always in her designer suit, but her face was drawn with worry. I tried to talk to him, she said without preamble. He wouldn't listen. He still thinks he's protecting you, in his own twisted way. I laughed bitterly. Protecting me? By stealing my work and giving it to David. He thinks the tech industry is too cutthroat for you. That you're too, she hesitated. Too female, I supplied. Too soft. Too much like you. She flinched at that. We both knew the story. How she'd given up her own career in biotech to support my father's ambitions, to be the perfect corporate wife and mother. It was a path I'd sworn never to follow. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I glanced at my computer screens where the last of my files were finishing their transfer. What I should have done years ago, make my own way. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Be careful, Alexandra. Your father, he won't take this well. After she left, I finished packing up my personal items. Photos, notebooks, the coffee mug Emily had given me when I'd made my first successful neural interface connection. I left the prototype on the workbench. It was company property now, after all. As I was about to leave, David appeared in my doorway, his expression smug. Don't take it personally, Alex. You're brilliant, really. But this kind of project needs a steady hand, someone with real business experience. I met his gaze calmly. You know what's funny, David? You're so convinced of your own superiority that you never once asked me how the technology actually works. His smile faltered slightly. That's what the technical documentation is for. Right, I said, picking up my box of belongings. Good luck with that. As I walked out of Rich Tech Industries for the last time, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. I'd spent my whole life trying to prove myself in these halls, trying to earn my father's respect in a game that was rigged from the start. But now, with my research safely backed up and plans already forming in my mind, I felt something else. Hope. Because what my father and David didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had something much bigger than a patent. I had proof. The binary was nearly empty when I arrived that evening, just a few hardcore programmers hunched over their laptops in dark corners. Emily was already there, 2 large coffees and her beat-up laptop waiting at our usual table. Tell me everything, she said as I sat down. I pulled out my encrypted drives and began explaining, not just about the patent transfer, but about what I discovered during my last system test. The neural interface wasn't just a way to help disabled people communicate. It had revealed something unprecedented during the trials. Look at this, I said, pulling up the test results. When we connected Subject 7 to the interface, it didn't just read their neural patterns, it enhanced them. Their cognitive processing speed increased by 40%. Emily's eyes widened as she scanned the data. Alex, this is incredible. Does anyone else know about this? No, I said, lowering my voice. It wasn't in any of the official documentation. I wanted to run more tests before reporting it. And now David owns a patent for technology he doesn't even understand the full potential of. Emily finished. She sat back, running a hand through her short black hair. So what's our play here? I smiled slightly at her use of our. Emily had been my ally since our days at MIT, the only other woman in most of our advanced computing classes. She understood what it meant to be constantly underestimated. First, we need to secure funding to continue the research privately. Then, already working on it, Emily interrupted, turning her laptop toward me. Remember Jacob Martinez from Silicon Valley Ventures? He's been asking about your work for months. 1 email from me and he's ready to meet tomorrow morning. I stared at her. You work fast. She shrugged. I knew your father would pull something like this eventually. I've been laying groundwork just in case. The next morning, I sat across from Jacob Martinez in his sleek downtown office, watching him review my real research data. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes lit up at certain points. He understood exactly what he was seeing. This is far beyond what was outlined in the patent, he said finally, looking up at me. The potential applications are enormous, I finished. But there's a complication. My father's company owns the patent, which they've transferred to another employee. Jacob smiled slightly. A patent that doesn't include this enhanced functionality. A patent for, essentially, a less advanced version of your technology. He leaned forward. Ms. Richards, I'd like to make you an offer. SVV is prepared to fund the continued development of this enhanced version. We'll provide lab space, resources, legal protection. And in return, we want to be your primary investor when you're ready to go public. We believe this technology could be worth billions, especially given its medical and educational applications. I thought about my father's dismissive words, about David's smug certainty that he deserved my work more than I did. When can we start? The next 6 months were a blur of activity. Emily joined me full-time, helping to set up our new lab and recruit a small team of trusted researchers. We worked around the clock, refining the enhanced neural interface and documenting every breakthrough meticulously. News of my departure from RickTech made waves in the industry. My father gave interviews describing it as an amicable separation, while David boasted about his plans for his technology. I kept quiet, focused on our work, knowing that timing would be everything. Then came the day that changed everything. Microsoft's head of innovation reached out, requesting a meeting. They'd heard rumors about our enhanced neural interface and wanted to discuss potential applications. The meeting was set for a Wednesday morning. That same morning, RichTech was scheduled to make its first public demonstration of their version of the neural interface, the version David had spent months trying to understand and replicate without success. I sat in Microsoft's Seattle headquarters, watching their executives' faces as I demonstrated our technology. Unlike the RichTech version, ours worked flawlessly, showing not just basic neural communication but enhanced cognitive function. This is revolutionary, their chief technology officer said, shaking his head in amazement. The applications for education alone. Ms. Richards, we'd like to make you an offer. $900 million for exclusive rights to the technology. My phone buzzed with a news alert. RichTech's demonstration had failed spectacularly, with David unable to get the interface to perform even basic functions. Their stock was already dropping. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I should mention something. RichTech currently holds a patent for a similar technology. The CTO smiled. We're aware of that patent. We're also aware that it describes a much more basic system than what you've shown us today. Their patent wouldn't cover this enhanced version. Just then my phone rang. My mother's number. I excused myself to take the call. Alexandra, she said, her voice urgent. Your father, he's furious. The demonstration was a disaster. David couldn't get it to work, and now their biggest investors are pulling out. How unfortunate, I said, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. They're trying to figure out what went wrong. Your father's threatening to sue you for corporate espionage. I laughed softly. He can try. But every line of code, every test result, every breakthrough is thoroughly documented. I didn't steal anything. I just took my own work with me, work that wasn't included in their patent. After hanging up, I returned to the Microsoft executives with a decision. $900 million isn't enough, I said firmly. This technology will revolutionize human-computer interaction. It's worth at least twice that. 2 hours later, I walked out of Microsoft with a deal for $1.8 billion and complete control over the technology's development. Emily was waiting outside with champagne. To karma, she said, handing me a glass. And to men who underestimate women in tech. My phone had been buzzing constantly, calls from my father, from David, from board members, suddenly realizing what they'd lost. I turned it off without checking the messages. The next morning, I walked into RickTech one last time, heading straight to my father's office. He looked up as I entered, his face a storm of emotions. You planned this, he accused. You let us take a worthless patent while keeping the real breakthrough for yourself. No, Dad, I said calmly. You took what you wanted without ever asking what I had actually created. You were so convinced that David deserved it more that you never even questioned whether you understood what it was. Microsoft, he said bitterly. They're saying it's the biggest tech deal of the year. $1.8 billion, I confirmed. Plus ongoing control of development. Not bad for someone who was just going to get married and leave, right? He flinched at having his own words thrown back at him. Alexandra, we can work something out. The company, your grandfather's company, will survive without me, I cut him off. But it'll never be what it could have been. Because you and every man in that boardroom were too blinded by your own prejudices to see what was right in front of you. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Dad, David's version of the interface will never work. He's missing about 30% of the code, the part that makes it all function. I believe that technically belongs to me since I developed it after the patent transfer. His face reddened. You vindictive little. Brilliant entrepreneur. I suggested. Successful innovator. Take your pick, but little anything isn't on the table anymore. As I walked out of his office for the last time, I felt light, free. The company I'd grown up in, the father I'd tried so hard to please, they no longer had any power over me. 1 year later, I stood on stage at the World Technology Summit, preparing to unveil the commercial version of the enhanced neural interface. The audience was packed with tech industry leaders, medical professionals, and education experts, all eager to see the technology that was being hailed as the biggest breakthrough since the internet. In the front row, I spotted my mother, sitting proudly with Emily and our core development team. My father had been invited but hadn't responded. David, I heard, had left tech entirely and was selling real estate in Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice strong and clear. What you're about to see isn't just a new way to interface with computers. It's a reminder that innovation doesn't care about gender, about age, or about corporate hierarchies. It cares about vision, determination, and the courage to stand up for what you've created. The interface demonstration was flawless, drawing gasps and applause from the audience. As I fielded questions afterward, a young woman raised her hand. Ms. Richards, what advice would you give to other women in tech who face discrimination? I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment, the late nights, the dismissive comments, the stolen patent, the sweet taste of vindication. Document everything, I said with a smile. Build something so extraordinary they can't ignore it. And never, ever let anyone tell you what you deserve. Later that evening, at the summit's closing reception, Emily raised her glass in a toast. To the woman who turned corporate sexism into a billion-dollar lesson. I clinked my glass against hers, thinking about the message I'd received from my father earlier that day. A brief text saying simply, "You proved me wrong." "No," I corrected, looking around at the team that had helped make it all possible. To all of us who refuse to let someone else define our worth, and to the next generation of women who won't have to fight quite as hard because we showed them it could be done.